Hi, I'm Wade from Superior Slushies, and today we're just going to do a short video on how to operate your slush machine. One of the things to check before you fill up your machine is to make sure that the bowl of the machine is clipped in place. Now, this is really critical because if it's not clipped in place, either immediately when you fill it up, it's going to leak, or it's going to leak after you start to freeze. So every bowl is slightly different depending on what type of machine you've got. In this case, there's a plastic little angled bracket that clips in behind the plastic down the bottom here. Other machines have got little legs that will clip in, and some will then clip onto the plastic itself with a little groove in the bottom of the bowl. Again, check it really thoroughly, because when it's clipped in and it's seated properly against your rear seal, you won't have leaks, and that's the most important thing. The rear seals on the machine is also something that you have to be careful of when you're installing your bowl. We'll go into that in more detail in another video about how to pull your machine apart and clean it. However, you want to make sure that that rear seal is seated all the way properly around the back of the evaporator. And the evaporator, that's the silver stainless steel part that comes out in the middle of your bowl. Making sure that that seal is seated all the way around will make sure that your bowl will seal around that rear seal properly and again prevent any leaking. The next thing to make sure is that you've got the correct mix ratio. Now, the reason why you want the correct mix ratio in your slush machine is really simple. One, and most importantly, the taste. Your customers will notice if the mix is wrong, if you've got too much water or too much syrup. It'll either taste too sweet and sickly, or it'll taste too icy and too watery. But the second reason, which not many people realize, is the consistency of the product that you're going to make. If the syrup and the water ratio isn't correct, what you're going to end up with is an over freezing scenario or an under freezing scenario. Whereas the product that you're making is either too sloppy, or in other cases, it will be too icy. Now, the problems that you've got are, if it's too icy, it won't flow out of your taps properly. The second problem that you will have is it puts a lot of load and stress on the gearbox that turns the auger in the middle of the machine. The more stress you put on that gearbox, the more damage you're going to create to it long term. On the subject of mixing your syrup, make sure that you check the label of the syrup that you're buying. In our case, the product that we produce here has a 4:1 mix ratio. Now that means 1 part of syrup to 4 parts of water. We've set our bottles up at that ratio and in this 2 litre size just to make it easy for you. Most bowls hold between 10 and 12 litres. That means 1 bottle of syrup, and you can refill that bottle 4 times with water and you've got the perfect mix. The other option is to buy a bottle that you can mix the product in. You can also keep it cold in a 10 litre bottle in a fridge, so if you're topping up during the middle of the day, you can make your refreezing process much faster. When you turn your machine on and you're ready to start freezing your product, depending on the type of machine you've got, you'll have 2 different functions. You'll have a night function, also called a cold drinks function, and you'll also have the freeze or the slushy function. Now, depending on what type of machine you've got, you'll have the appropriate buttons to press. A lot of the older machines or Italian machines have got buttons down the side of the machine that you would then select, whether it be cold drink, or they might have a symbol for the slushy product. In this situation, we've got this machine on cold, so it's been on overnight, but just on cold drink. So we'll push it onto slush. The second thing to do is to realize that it's not going to happen instantly. Depending on what type of machine you've got, you want to allow 3 hours of freezing time from ambient temperature. Ambient temperature is classified in the slushy world between 23 and 28 degrees. If your product is colder, it's going to be faster. By using your overnight function or your cold drinks function, we're keeping this particular machine at between 3 and 5 degrees. That keeps the product fresh, it saves any issues with bacteria, and it makes refreezing the product much faster. Between 23 and 28 degree ambient temperature is where your machine wants to operate. It gives your machine an opportunity to be able to dissipate the heat from the bowl as it's making it icy, and putting it through the refrigeration system and blowing it out the other side as hot air. If your ambient temperature is higher than 28 degrees, everything's going to be a lot slower, no matter what type of machine you've got. So it's important to realise that indoor use with a machine in air conditioning is always going to work better than a 36-degree day outside in the sunshine. The three worst things that you can do when starting up your slush machine is 1, having your liquid that's going in above 28 degrees. 2, having the environment that it's in above 28 degrees. Or 3, direct sunlight. They're the 3 no-nos. Most slush machines can deal with 1 of the 3, but not 2 or 3 of the 3. Always allow 3 hours for your slush machine to freeze. Even if it looks like it's already just about frozen after an hour, in some cases, like a machine like this, the cycling of the compressor where it turns off and then it keeps mixing that slush with the liquidy product and then turns the compressor back on will give you the right consistency. And when you've got the right consistency, you'll see a cascading, almost like watching clouds move in the sky. And that's the way it should look when it's done. You won't have liquidy residue at the bottom, and you won't have an iceberg at the top. That's a classic sign of it being over frozen, and that's where you'll need to adjust your density control. To adjust the density control, which means how thick your slush is done in different ways on different machines. On this particular machine, we're using a digital setup. There is no adjustments at the back of the machine to control that density. So you adjust it by simply changing the temperature that it's aiming to work at. The colder it's set, the icier and harder it will be, which is also good to be able to adjust it if you're doing frozen cocktails. You might need to set your machine a little lower. But remember, whenever you're adjusting your density control, whether it be on a machine like this or on a more manual machine, particularly Italian-made machines, the density control should only be adjusted a small amount of the way. On a digital machine, adjust it 0.1 of a degree at a time and give it half an hour in between each adjustment. That way you'll see what is actually going to work for you. On a normal traditional machine with a manual screw type adjustment, you want to adjust it half a turn, then see how it goes. If you go too much, too quick, the whole machine will over-freeze or it'll under-freeze if you're going back the other way, and then you'll never be able to measure what is that optimum setting. Now, the density control that we've talked about on a digital machine is nice and easy. It's just a matter of pushing buttons on the front. But on older style machines, and still machines that are made today, the mechanism is here where you've got a screw. Now, this particular machine here has a screw that you would screw with a screwdriver, and what it does is it puts pressure on a spring that's inside here. I'll show you on a different machine exactly what it looks like inside, but what it's doing is it's holding the gearbox inside under tension. The more tension it's on, the more the gearbox will push on a switch on this side and hold the gas on. So the more tension on the spring puts more pressure on that gearbox, which puts more pressure on the switch that allows the refrigerant gas into the bowl. So effectively what it's doing is it's putting more cold into the bowl. Again, showing you the density control, now I can show you exactly what's happening inside. On the outside of this machine, you remove a little flap, and in this case, the screw mechanism isn't something you use a screwdriver with, but something that you would just turn this dial. Remember, when you're adjusting your density control, go half a turn at a time and see what happens. Give it half an hour. Let the machine do its thing, and then decide, does it need more or does it need less? So internally, what's happening here is this dial turns and pushes against this plastic spindle, which is putting pressure on this spring, which is putting pressure on this gearbox mechanism here, which swings. The thicker your slush is, the more it's going to torque and twist around. On here, we've got a switch. Now that switch controls letting gas, refrigerant gas, into the evaporator of this bowl. When the mix is thick, the gearbox comes off the switch and stops the gas flow. When it's thin, it goes back onto the switch and lets the gas flow through. So it's a pretty rudimentary system, but it does work. Now, when refilling your machine, one of the easiest things to use is a 2-litre bottle, whereas it's already marked on the side for your literage, so it's easy to fill and easy to work out. You want 8 litres of water and you want a 2-litre bottle of syrup. You can mix it all in the one bottle, shake it up, keep it in the fridge, and then it's going to be cold. Remember what we said about the ambient temperature of the liquid that's going in? The colder it is, the quicker it's going to freeze. Plus, when you're refilling the machine, if you've got it pre-mixed in here, there's no more guesswork. You can refill the machine when it's half full and just put in a small amount at a time and it'll refreeze really quite quickly. Rather than waiting until it gets all the way down to the bottom, and then when it gets to the bottom, it could take 3 hours to refreeze again. So it's something to consider. This is one of the easiest, quickest investments you can make to make your life easier with a slush machine. The best practice when you're refilling your slush machine is don't leave it until it's empty. Every time somebody comes into your store, if they see the machine is virtually empty, they're always going to think they're getting the last dregs from the bottom of the barrel. Keep your machine topped up. The more topped up it is, the more appealing it looks. And this has been done by soft drink companies all around the world. When you have a display fridge, the reps will always come out and encourage you to make sure it's always full. Now, we always understand with those drinks fridge that you should rotate your stock to make sure that the warmer ones go in at the back and the colder ones are always at the front. But the fuller it looks, the better it looks. It's like going into the supermarket during COVID. We all remember when all the shelves were bare, it looked like you were getting the last dregs of everything. Don't do that to your customers and you'll sell more product. When it comes to your slush machine and the product inside, you need to consider the fact that the product that you're putting in there has got preservatives in there. That's what gives you a 2-year shelf life from the time of manufacture. However, the moment you open this bottle and you mix it with water, that bacteria protection is going to start to decrease. And it decreases fairly dramatically. From 2 years in the bottle, it's going to go down to 7 days to use that in your machine when it's cold. If you leave it at an ambient temperature and you open it up, bacteria is going to grow faster. Now, be food safe. Keep your machine full of your liquid. Don't keep it out in ambient temperature once you've opened it. Once you've opened it, you want to keep it in the machine, keep it in the fridge. At night, at the very least, keep it on the cold setting on your machine, whether it be the overnight or the cold drink setting, or keep it frozen. That way, you're going to be providing a food-safe product to your customers. And finally, the best practices you can do with your machine. Keep it full, that makes it appealing. Keep the syrup and water ratio at the right level like we've discussed. That'll make your product palatable to your clients, it'll make it appealing to them, and it'll also protect your machine long term. And remember, use that overnight function. Don't have it frozen all night. I know it'll be easier to leave it on and use more energy. However, by using that function, it melts down, everything's remixed, and then when you turn it on the next day, not only is it going to be fast to refreeze, but it's also going to be perfectly mixed again.